Okie dokie. Hello and welcome to the overview and assessment of recent congressional action and relief for small business and nonprofit. A little bit about the format here. This is going to be focused on small business and nonprofit. There are a lot of questions and things that have changed about individual tax code stuff, and that is not the focus of this workshop. We'll do a little bit of that at the end, but this is really for small business and nonprofits. Heads up about that. I also want to let people know that most everything that I'm talking about today did not exist as law until 10 days ago. So there is an enormous amount of uncertainty still. There will be at least one and probably several things I say today that are going to be slightly different than the way I say them once the IRS and other agencies, Department of Treasury, Department of Labor, change and clarify and redirect things. So just be aware of that. This is the most current information that I could find and the best of my knowledge. There's lots of interpretation still. Okay.
Ryan, I have a quick add-on here. When you're saying small business owners, you're also meaning independent contractors as well. Yes,
absolutely. Okay. Thank you. That's great. Thanks for saying that. Totally. Okay. So we are going to cover, I kind of said this, we're going to cover a couple things. We're going to cover the various loan programs that you may have heard about from the Small Business Administration. We're going to cover unemployment a little bit because it is relevant to anybody who's self-employed right now in a way that it hasn't been historically. And then we're going to do a little bit of grab bag of other topics. Like I said before, we're not going to focus on individual tax stuff, although there is a bunch of that. For example, we're not going to talk too much about the $1,200 check because that's not really a small business or self-employed contractor or nonprofit thing. Okay, so I'm calling this topic, first topic here, option Y, as in option why not. It is the COVID-19 Economic Injury Disaster Loan. We're going to call that the EIDL from now on. It's actually really not a loan at all. It is a grant. The government doesn't want to call it a grant because they don't want to let everybody know there's some free money sitting around, but this is really and truly a government grant for up to $10,000. And I think this is one of the biggest misunderstandings is that this is not, you're going to get $10,000 and you're certainly not going to get it in 3 days because I know people applied for it 10 days ago or 9 days ago and still haven't gotten it. But it is, in theory, $10,000 of relief that any small business or nonprofit, whether you're even from an Uber driver to a 500 employee nonprofit, are all qualified for. And it's supposed to be going to people's bank accounts very quickly, but I've not talked to anybody who's gotten it. You apply at that website listed right there. And there are a few very minor exceptions, but basically it is fully refundable to you, which means it becomes a grant. The loan becomes a grant with proper documentation of how you've spent the money. Okay. The only way it does not become a grant is if you can't explain how you used it. Okay. And you can use it to pay for any sort of bill that your business would normally have, including paying yourself. Okay. So that is really great. The big question mark is how much money is it actually going to be? And the answer is nobody knows, but it could be up to $10,000. Yes, it is hard to believe that that is really going to be a thing and is really going to be that good. 10,000 essentially free dollars for your business, but that is literally what's written in the law. To get it, you'll go to that website, and all you have to do is report your gross income for 2019 before expenses. You have to have been in business prior to January 31st. And you have to explain what kind of business or a nonprofit you are, give them your social security number or EIN number, and that's it. It is it's free money. For anybody who's self-employed or small business or a nonprofit. How much free money? We don't know. Up to 10,000. Okay.
Ryan,
and yep.
I have a very quick question that came in is, will this be available online or should people be taking written notes?
Yes, thank you. I mentioned that earlier. This is because I'm going to record this and post it online hopefully tomorrow. and I'm also going to send a follow-up little resource packet for everybody too.
Okay.
So there's going to be, you know, take as much notes as you want, but I would say maybe focus on listening. Thanks. That's a really good question.
Thank you.
Yeah. And any like sort of structural question about that, like that, definitely send to my mom now. Other questions, hold off till a point later when I'll say start saying your questions, because I might answer them later. Okay. One thing I want to be really clear about with this loan, so I'm positioning here, is that this loan, this EIDL loan, is not the standard EIDL loan. There is another, there's a long-standing thing called the economic injury disaster loan that you get after hurricanes and things like that. This is not that loan. So if you're Googling around, you might end up reading about the normal economic injury disaster loan. This is not that. This is a special COVID-19 one. That being said, there are ways you could merge this into a regular economic injury disaster loan for $2 million. That's a longer step. And then there's also ways to merge this loan with what's called the PPP loan, which we're going to talk about in just a minute. Okay, so option why not? Okay, now we're going to talk about option one, which is, and the reason I'm calling these options is because to some extent the three topics I'm going to talk about in a minute are mutually exclusive. Unlike option Y, the $10,000 up to $10,000 EIDL loan, which is anybody can get that if you have a business that existed prior to January 31st. And by the way, Airbnbs do count for that. As far as I understand, they do not count for this if your Airbnb is reporting itself as a rental business and not as a standard business. And we're not going to get into more details on that on this call unless we have lots of extra time, but there is a difference between a rental business and a normal business. Rental businesses are not eligible for the PPP. A regular business is, and the difference is a longer story than we're going to get into right now. The Paycheck Protection Program. First and foremost, I want to mention you do not need to have a paycheck to qualify this. Self-employed people absolutely qualify for this, and everywhere I'm going to be talking about payroll a lot in this slide. Anytime I'm saying payroll, substitute that for your net income from self-employment for 1 month on average. So, for example, if last year your net income, that's your profit from self-employment, was $12,000, then your average is $1,000. Okay, so your payroll is $1,000 in that calculation. Okay, for those who have paychecks or those who does substitution, this loan that can easily turn into a grant is for up to 2.5 times 1 month of payroll, and that includes that payroll is defined as wages, benefits, health insurance benefits, retirement benefits, as well as I believe unemployment insurance and workers' comp as well are all calculated into that. These calculations I've seen posted have changed almost every day, but that's the current most recent one I've seen. And this loan, similar to the last one, but with a little bit more circumscribed rules, is forgivable if it's used for payroll, rent, utilities, or mortgage interest, and that probably includes the home office, although I haven't seen that in print anywhere. And is for the 8-week period after the grant is received. Okay, so if you use this grant over an 8-week period, just for those types of things, then the whole thing becomes a grant. The whole loan becomes a grant. There is some stipulations there, but they're fairly straightforward and not things that are going to affect 95% of you, is my guess. The questions that do remain are how quick are these grants rolling out, and will everyone get 2.5 times 1 month of payroll or not? And nobody knows the answer to those questions. But the way the law is written and the way that the act seems to be intended is that pretty much anybody who applies for this should be getting it, which is a big deal as far as relief. It's taken me definitely some time to get used to the idea that the government is actually throwing this much money at nonprofits and small businesses right now. And I definitely have my skepticism up to whether it's all going to pan out this way until I start seeing people receiving the money. But the letter of the law is very clear that this becomes a grant if you're using it for these things over that 8-week period once you get it. One thing that's important to understand is that this is important if you have employees besides yourself, which is true, I think, for a handful, but not most of the people on this call, is that if your head count for your business reduces, your forgiveness, the amount of this that becomes a grant is also reduced, okay, proportionally. So if you used to have 5 employees, but you decided you let some of them go and didn't rehire new people to replace them since the base time period, which I believe is February 15th, then the amount of the loan that becomes a grant is reduced by that same amount. So if you went from 5 to 4 employees, then the amount that becomes a grant is reduced by 20%, okay? Unlike the Why Not loan, this one is a little bit more of a hassle to get. You apply for it at your bank, and people are also applying for it online at platforms like Lendio.com, maybe others. Some banks are ready to go with this right now, although I think they're like best case scenario, like ready to go, but kind of confused and overwhelmed and long lines and things like that. Other banks, including my bank, Advantis, last I spoke to them, they had no plans to move on this at all, so that was worrisome. So if your bank is not doing this, looking at online lenders is probably going to be the best strategy, because starting a new bank account right now, not very fun. And you're probably not going to get a priority at those banks, okay?
Ryan, can I interrupt you 1 second here? I have a couple of questions. Is there a limited amount of money? So should we apply now to these things? Like especially that small business loan thing?
That's a really great question. So the short answer is, okay, so there's $350 billion in this program, okay, which is a lot of money, okay? My understanding was that the budgeting at the time of that $350 billion was 50% of the payroll for every self-employed person and small business and nonprofit in the entire country for 1 month. That's how they came up with $350 billion. I have heard that there's a bill already in Congress to expand this. Are we generally skeptical of the government and wondering how these things are actually going to work? Are the banks going to have the sufficient capital to make these things roll out? Those are very big questions that no one knows the answer to. However, my personal opinion is that the government would like as many people as possible who can take this option 1, to do so, because they don't want you taking option number 2, which we're going to talk about in a second, which is unemployment. The government would rather have people working for employers and staying in their businesses and not getting used to the idea that the government provides them with a fixed income. Because politically, economically, and socially, the government has a very strong vested interest against that. You think you could even call this the keeping everybody off unemployment program, is another way to think about this in some ways.
I have one more related question right here.
Yeah.
If someone has already done their PPP, can they also still apply for option Y? Can you do both?
The short answer is yes. Yeah, I'll just say yes. The answer is yes. Okay. And in general, too, just because I don't want to, I feel like if some people start sending questions, we're going to start getting bombarded. If it's like maybe just, hold most of them unless you feel like you just like missed a really straightforward thing that could just be reiterated.
All right, so we'll be holding them for a while now. Okay.
Yeah, just for a little bit. Okay, so that actually is a great segue to the next thing I was going to say, which is that if you do get that $10,000 or whatever it ends up being, COVID-19 economic injury disaster loan, the amount of this loan that gets forgiven is reduced by that amount. So you don't get to double dip, basically. Those two, basically, if you get that first one we were talking about a second ago, it merges with this one. And whoever provides you with this PPP loan is going to know that you got the other one in some way figured into their calculation. Exactly how that's going to work, nobody knows, but they're going to figure it out, that's my guess. To the extent that you do not get forgiveness on this loan, it's still pretty awesome as far as loans go, right? So if you are someone who's in debt right now, you might consider getting this just to get off some of your debt. 1% interest, a 6-month deferral, and a 2-year term. That's like better than any credit card you could ever imagine, unless you have some sort of like first 6 months free kind of thing, right? 6-month deferral means that interest starts accumulating right at the start, but you don't have to make any payments. There's no penalty for non-payment until 6 months later. You do have to pay off the whole loan within 2 years. Okay. Okay. Option 2, unemployment. For those who are not familiar with how unemployment works, I'm going to talk about it a little bit. This is information for Oregon, but I think almost everything here is true for Washington as well. Yeah. So to qualify for unemployment, historically, you needed to have $1,000 in wages during 2019, during multiple quarters of 2019, or have worked 500 hours during 2019. And regardless, you have to have been laid off of a job or in some way had your job restructured or be furloughed or something like that. You can't have quit your job and done something else, okay? You can't have been fired either, okay? Oh, by the way, unemployment law, absolutely not my area of expertise. So I've done a lot of studying here, but like I'm a small business and nonprofit consultant. I've had to learn about this to help people out, but I just want everybody to know that this is, I didn't, you know, I've been on unemployment before, but that has been my entirety of knowledge around unemployment. I've done a lot of studying on this, but this is a major crash course for me too, okay? Okay, also SBA loans, not something I studied before too. So a lot of this stuff is new. So those are how you used to be able to qualify for unemployment. And it's important to understand that, well, right off the bat, that there's been a massive expansion of unemployment so that now, in addition to the criteria listed on that slide, anybody who is self-employed and who has lost a sufficient amount of work, which we'll talk about that in a second, can also apply for unemployment now, okay? So that is a massive expansion of unemployment and a major change to the rules, and the government agencies have absolutely not figured out how to handle that, nor the huge volume of unemployment. So be ready for major hassles and confusion there, okay? Okay, so I want everybody to talk through how unemployment is calculated, because this is really important for understanding some strategic decisions that you might be making for your business, and sadly. So your weekly unemployment, the way it's supposed to work, is it's supposed to be 1/26 of your highest waged quarter during 2019. So let's pretend that you are someone who made $32,000 a year and you made exactly $8,000 each quarter. That's obviously a simplified thing, but we're going to go with that, okay? That person would be making $308 per week on unemployment under the normal old system, okay? In Oregon, by the way, you're always going to make at least $135, regardless of the formula above, and the most you're going to get, regardless of the formula above, is $648, okay? Under the new plan that just passed Congress 10 days ago, which is yet to be implemented, but is supposed to be implemented effective April 1st, so that's weird because there's going to be some retroactive stuff and we haven't figured out how that's going to happen. Everyone gets those benefits plus a flat $600 per week. You can do, probably most of you can do that math, but under our example right here, that means this person is making now $908 a week on unemployment once this program is fully functioning. That's a lot more money than this person was making before, or at least a bit more than they were making before, okay? We'll talk more about that in a second. It's important to understand that unemployment benefits disappear once you start making a certain amount of money, okay? So again, in our example above, if that person starts making more than $103 per week, a third of that 308, then they're going to start reducing your unemployment benefits. And if you make more than 308, they're going to pause your benefits altogether. And that's within a given week, so it could fluctuate. You know, you might have some weeks where it's lower, some weeks where you're back on unemployment, other weeks where you're off. That is a normal thing as far as I understand of how unemployment works. Like I said before, this is a major change, both the number of people, obviously, as well as the fact that small business can get in on this now, okay? So be aware that there is going to be major confusion in navigating this. I don't want to sound discouraging, and I do want to encourage everybody who thinks unemployment is the best option for them to apply for it right away. However, I have had a number of very frustrating stories from people who have, including people who have been told by the state of Oregon that if you want to receive unemployment, you need to pay back taxes on unemployment insurance for 2019 and file a ton of paperwork to do so. I am cautiously optimistic that that will get thrown out within a week or two. Let us hope it is true. And that would only be relevant to people who are self-employed, not people who are waged employees. That's probably also true for those who are S-Corp owners as well, by the way. Whew. Okay, so there's a lot that's new, a lot of moving pieces there, but that's the gist of how unemployment works. Okay, I want to talk about a third option that is going to be totally irrelevant to 90% of you. So this is only going to be an option for businesses that have multiple employees, and is only going to be better than the payroll protection plan we talked about a minute ago for those who cannot keep their organization fully staffed. And it's important to understand you cannot get this and the PPP, nor can you get this and unemployment, okay? You also, by the way, can't get the PPP and unemployment, okay? But you can get the EIDL and unemployment. We'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, so, and sorry for all the acronyms. We'll do a review of all the acronyms and all that stuff in a minute too. So this employee retention credit is you can only get this if you have employees. So self-employed people, take a breather for a second. We don't honestly know if S-Corp people are included in this. I've seen articles saying both ways, so that's frustrating too. But for businesses that have regular employees and your business has been partially or fully closed down by the government, okay, so it has to be a legal thing saying that you in some way can't do your work, whether it's due to a shelter-in-place order or to a specific closure of your business. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to be able to answer that one for you, but do your research on that before assuming you qualify. Or your business has lost 50% of its income in Q2, and then also this one, unlike the other things, goes into Q3 and Q4, okay? Under this plan, 50% of the wages your employee earns are covered by the federal government, up to $5,000 per employee max. That is $5,000 per head if this thing goes on for a while, okay? If this is all over in a month, this is not going to be a very good benefit because the PPP covers you for 2 months. If this goes on for 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 months, especially 4 or more, this suddenly starts to become more attractive for businesses with employees that are still managing to stay in business despite a partial or full closure. By the way, an example of a partial closure would be a restaurant that is still doing takeout but is not able to have people sit at it. Additionally, people taking this benefit can also access another benefit, which is that your payroll taxes or self-employment taxes, although that is less likely for people taking this benefit, are deferred until 2021 and 2022, the end of it. So if you are someone who thinks this might be a good benefit for you, probably best to schedule a call with me because it's a little more complicated than the others. It does have the advantage of not being regulated by the banks and being regulated by the IRS and having a pretty clear way of getting the money, unlike the other things which are all regulated by banks, and there's a lot more weird, confusing red tape there. This one has the major disadvantage, though, of only, this is kind of dark, but only really being advantageous to people if your business is closed for more than 3 or 4 months. Otherwise, the PPP is going to be probably more money. Okay, so we're going to do a summary and kind of evaluate these options using an 8-week time frame to simplify things, okay? Some of the, because we gotta keep it simple. Okay, sample human number one makes $24,000 a year, roughly $2,000 a month. Under the old employment system, that person, if they're making the exact same amount every quarter, would get roughly $230 a week, or during an 8-week period in our sample, $1,840. Under the new system with the $600 bonuses, once that kicks in, this person would now be getting $830 a week, which is $6,640 total during that 8-week period. I know that some of you are probably looking at this right now and being like, oh my God, I just got a raise. I'm going to the employment office right away. And that's real. When Oregon's going to get their head on straight and be able to implement this for people, especially self-employed people, I don't know. But presumably once they do, this is totally a lot of money. By contrast, this person under the exact same calculations, if they get the PPP, they're only going to get $5,000 because that's 2.5 times their normal monthly pay, which is $2,000. Okay, so for this person, unemployment is a better option, which is weird but true. I'm not even going to get into the ERC here, but just keep in mind that that would be a mutually exclusive option. Also, keep in mind that the PPP includes benefits, so that throws off the calculation a bit. If you have health insurance or retirement benefits, then the calculation is a little more complicated. Also keep in mind that everybody can get that up to $10,000 EIDL loan, okay? And then just a reminder, things are going to change. Much is uncertain here, okay? Sample human 2, just to prepare a contrast here, this person makes $50,000 a year at self-employment, let's just say, or a waged employee, which ends up being $4,167 a month when you do the math. Under the old system, they would be getting $480 a week. Under the new system, they're getting $1,080 a week, which is $8,640 total. So that is definitely less than they would be getting with the PPP, okay? Not even factoring in benefits. But maybe you're just feeling like it's a depressing, crappy struggle to try to keep your business open right now. Maybe unemployment is more attractive. It's a really complicated decision, but this is the math at least. And obviously it does not, again, factor in the hassles of either approach. Is the PPP going to be easier than unemployment? I don't know. Is unemployment going to be easier than the PPP? I don't know. It's going to be different for everybody, and it might depend literally who your unemployment officer is and who your PPP officer at your bank is. So that's frustrating. Okay, now's the time when I say if people have miscellaneous questions about any of this, start sending them the way of Wendy, my mom, who's in here. Hopefully everybody's figured out how to send her your questions. If not, we'll do it. If we have time, we'll do a little audio thing at the end. We'll talk about that. So yeah.
Do you want me to tell you the questions that have come in so
far?
No.
No, there's a little bit more first.
Okay.
Okay, so here is a grab bag of other things that are not related to like overarching strategy that I want to mention. There are a lot of local resources in Portland and in Oregon, for those of you who are in Portland, Oregon. I will include them on the list of resources that I'm sending out to everybody tomorrow. I want to mention in particular Prosper Oregon for any of you that are women or people of color. They have a specific zero interest grant, loan that they're offering, and they have had some grant programs, although I think the deadlines for those may have passed, but I would keep an eye out for future expansions. Prosper Oregon or Prosper Portland, I can't remember what it's called, one or the other, Prosper. It'll be in the links I send out too. Okay, one of the more complicated topics that I'm not going to get too much into, but it would be irresponsible not to mention, is that there was another act that passed Congress called the Families First Coronavirus Response Act that created a mandatory government-refunded paid leave for anybody who gets COVID-19, has kids who've been kicked out of school, or who is taking care of someone who has COVID-19. If you fit into one of those three categories at any point in this next time period, this applies to you, and it's important to understand how it works. If it doesn't, then it doesn't, basically. This is a plan by which employers must pay their employees for 2 weeks of at their normal wage, paid sick leave, and then the government refunds that money to you. It's done through payroll, or if you're self-employed, it's unfortunately done through a credit on your 2020 tax return. So if you fit in this category, keep the doctor notes, keep records of when you talk to doctors and things like that. Especially if you're self-employed, it's important because while you are going to get this money, you're not going to get it until you file your taxes next year, a year from now. So that's a bummer, but it's the reality of things, okay? 2 weeks, I'm sorry, and it's 2 weeks if you're sick or taking care of a sick person. It's 9 weeks or 12 weeks if your kid's out of school. So but it's a lower dollar amount if your kids are out of school, okay? I'll include a link to more information about this. There's a lot online about it because so many employers are having to navigate this all at once. And for those of you who use Gusto, there's a lot of information on Gusto about it as well if you have employees. Most of the resources though are geared toward people who have employees. So if you're self-employed, bummer for you for this credit, but do know that you can get it eventually when you file your taxes. S-Corp owners who are paid wages are also included in this and count as the employee category. Okay, Section 139 deductions. I had never heard of this in my life, but I should have prior to this. There is a part of the tax code that's existed for a long time that says if you are in a federally declared disaster area, your employer can give you money to take care of your health, to reimburse you for any expenses that have occurred that have directly impacted your job due to the disaster. So if you had to set up, if you had to get a cell phone or start working from home and you didn't previously and you didn't want to pay some of your rent that way, or if you had to get a second phone or you had to buy Zoom or whatever it is, your employer can pay you for those things or pay your employees if you're the employer. And write that off as a tax deduction, and it is not taxable income to the employees. So this is a nice way to give an employee a sort of bonus during this time period. They're not going to have to pay taxes on. Just something to keep in mind. The definition of how these Section 139 deductions work is really broad and very confusing, and there's not a ton of case law on them because they haven't been used very much, but there is speculation that you could also use this to cover things like if someone had to move into a new house because their roommate was a doctor and they're worried about elevated risk, that you could use this to cover their relocation costs and maybe even rent costs. You have to really be able to directly tie a new expense to COVID-19. That's really the key. But it doesn't have to be a business expense. In fact, it's specifically personal expenses. Funerals also apply here too. Hand sanitizer definitely counts. This is, again, only for employees and S-Corp owners. I will mention one more thing here, which is separate than this, is that if you have employees, you can pay off their student loans up to $5,000 this year. Again, tax-free benefit to employees. This one is not for people who are self-employed, not for S-Corp owners. Okay, installment agreements. For any of you that have an installment agreement with the IRS, you know what I'm talking about. You know what that is. For those of you who don't, be glad that you don't. For those that you do, they are suspended until July 15th, but you have to turn off your payments. The IRS is not going to do it for you. The IRS is literally recommending that you contact your bank to have the bank turn it off, which is totally bonkers. The IRS website will not allow you to turn it off. They will allow you to, if you have it done through their website, to reduce the number to $1, apparently, I've heard. I haven't tried this. But just be aware that you should definitely be freezing your installment agreements if you don't want to be paying them to the IRS right now. If you don't know what an installment agreement is, then don't worry about this. IRA withdrawals. This is probably only relevant to some of you, but it is an important thing to know. Anyone can take money out of their IRA right now to cover any sort of additional COVID-19 related expense, including paying yourself wages that have been replaced or lost, without having the normal 10% penalty that you get for taking money out of an IRA. And if you send that money back to your IRA within 3 years, you don't have to pay income tax on it at all either. So you can set it up either as a loan or as a normal taxable withdrawal from an IRA. If that's confusing, probably best to schedule a call with me. It's a little complicated. The question has come up for me in this, looking at this, for those who have money to do it. Could you put money into an IRA for 2019 still, and then withdraw it immediately to defer the tax benefit of the tax impact of getting money out of an IRA, to essentially get a tax benefit for 2019 and then reduce it for or increase it for 2020, basically just give yourself sort of a loan of income tax. The IRS has not said you can't do that, but I would be wary of trying it and maybe wait a few months to do that, because you have till 7/15 now to do that. Speaking of which, ignore all rumors to the contrary. The tax deadline is July 15th. There is no April 15th anymore, period. It doesn't exist. July 15th is the deadline. You don't need to file an extension. It is just July 15th. April 15th as a tax deadline is obliterated. Pretend it never existed. It's 7/15 now. Nonprofits, your tax filings have not yet been delayed. Look for more information about that soon. We'll see what happens. Tiny note regarding the $1,200 checks, even though I said I wasn't going to talk about them. This is the stimulus checks that everybody's supposed to get. If you have not filed your tax return for 2018 or 19, and you are supposed to, if you've not done it for either year, and you're not on Social Security, you should file your tax return right away if you're supposed to file it. Otherwise, you're not going to get the check until you do. If you do not have to file a tax return for 2018 or 2019, and you're not on Social Security, there is going to be a way, probably later this week, maybe next week, to register yourself for this program. Regardless, if you have filed your tax return and you want to get the money quickly, you want the IRS to have your direct deposit info. The IRS is going to be setting up a thing supposedly later this week to tell them where you want the check direct deposited. Again, you have to have filed your tax return or be on Social Security to get the check. But keep an eye on the IRS's website for that. If you just Google IRS coronavirus, you'll find out where to put that direct deposit information. Okay, what's next? If you want to talk with me more about this stuff, schedule with me. There's a link in all of my emails, or send me an email if you can't find it. For folks who are new clients, all COVID-19 related consults are 20% off. For folks that are existing clients, they're 50% off. And if you're a bookkeeping client with me, which there's not, I think most of them I've already talked to, those consults are free. So yeah, be aware of what you read and of digital tools. There's a lot of misinformation going around. I would encourage folks to really look for reliable sources. Financial magazines, I think, are going to be better than random blog posts. Look for CPA firms and law and legal firms. Be aware of things being misrepresented in newspapers. I've definitely read things incorrect in newspapers, unfortunately. I want to briefly talk about the PPP as TP. I don't want to trivialize the economic situation that people are in at all, but I also want people to understand that the rush to get these PPP loans is in many ways similar to the rush to get toilet paper. There's a lot of bad information. You're going to be waiting in line for a long time with a lot of other people. And I personally believe that this money is not going to run out in the next few weeks. Could I be wrong? I could be. But I don't think the government wants to let that happen, because they don't want everybody going on to unemployment because of the calculation we all just looked at a minute ago. It's going to cost the government more in some cases to have everybody on unemployment, and the government does not want people getting used to having a check for $1,000 every week from the government, right? So be aware of you know, if you want to wait in line for the PPP, and you need to wait in line for the PPP because you need cash right away, that I would absolutely start doing that right away. Just like I would tell everybody who's thinking they're going to get unemployment to apply for it right away. Apply for it until you get the PPP. Get unemployment now, get the PPP later. that's totally fine. You can't get the PPP and be on unemployment, but you can certainly get unemployment until you're on the PPP. I'll be sending out the video and resources tomorrow. And lastly, send me updates on your process. If you're dealing with unemployment in the PPP, I'm collecting information. I can't promise to reply to every email, and I would much rather people schedule me for a call than ask me a bunch of questions over email, but either one can work, especially if you're a new client. If you're a new client, I'm actually gonna say you kind of need to schedule a call, not email me, if you don't have an existing MOU or contract with me. And then lastly, I'm going to do an attempt at some deep thoughts here for really briefly. This is a super stressful time. We are all really suffering and really confused and scared, and that is obvious. And for a lot of you, you are hustling like worse than you've ever had to deal with this crisis and the situation. And like, just like honor yourselves and honor all of us who are in that right now, and don't let yourself get crushed by these administrative systems as the best you can, and also be patient with the people dealing with these administrative systems because they're really being crushed right now too. So it's hard for everyone. And then also for those of you who are doing relatively well now economically, I really want to invite people to donate money to nonprofits right now and to groups that are doing direct support in general for people affected by this, and for friends who are desperate for money. I know it's probably obvious, but please consider doing that right now. One last thing I'll mention, for this year, anybody can donate $300 to any nonprofit and have it as a tax write-off. Historically, that was only allowed for people who itemized deductions, which is like 20% of people these days that itemize deductions. So everybody, if you have the resources to do it, please donate $300 to a nonprofit tomorrow. And if you have the resources to do it, that $1,200 check when you get it, maybe donate that too. If you're struggling right now economically, this is not a message to you. This is for people who have those resources to give. And that is it for me. So we'll do questions that people sent in, and if we have time, it's before 5:30. We'll take more questions, I guess, too.
Okay. So are you going to go through the ones that were emailed in first?
Yeah, why don't? So I think that, so I talked about Airbnb stuff, that question was in there. I feel like I've talked about S-Corp stuff as best as I can in this call without getting into really like wonky details, but if there's one in there, I'll try to give it a try. So that's what I'll say about that. And I'm gonna also put on video view. Yeah.
Okay. So you want me to just shoot you some of the questions then?
Let's do it.
Okay. Because I was answering questions or looking at them, I wasn't able to actually hear your whole presentation.
Yeah,
Did you cover if there were any resources available for nonprofit organizations?
Everything I said on this call is relevant to nonprofits.
Okay.
Wait, let me try to think if there's any exceptions to that.
Okay. And then one of the questions that had been emailed in, if they still have work but foresee it drying up by the end of the second quarter, what are their options?
I would say that one thing we don't know about the PPP is there a way to say, I don't want to get this loan until later? I doubt that's the case, but that'd be nice if it was true. Mm-hmm. I would say that if you are no longer bringing in revenue, I would start moving into these resources calmly over the next few weeks, okay? If you are, if your organization has if you're not making any money at all, then I would be moving rapidly into these things. If you think you're going to be running out of money, or if you think your income is going to reduce dramatically after a month, then, you know, move at that pace. Your pace should be commensurate with how much money you have, and using the calculations we talked about before, you know, think about whether unemployment or the PPP is the best option for you. Hope that helps.
All right. I'm going to give you just a couple quick questions, because I think they're like 1 or 2 word answers. Get those out of the way. Cool. One is, does the FFCRA apply to part-time employees?
Does the FFCRA, yes, it would apply to part-time employees to the extent, but their wages would be prorated.
Okay. Another quick
question. Not prorated, but your wages would be, you would get, I believe the way it works is you get half time off instead of full-time, like full-time office. It's basically based on both. If you have multiple jobs, then both of them should be giving you half of the money or whatever it is. If you just have one part-time job, then you should get your part-time wages.
Okay.
That is my understanding. I'm not, it's definitely labor law. Like almost, if you haven't noticed, almost nothing I talked about was taxes. It's all out of labor law and treasury rules around SBA loans, which is not my expertise until 10 days ago. So bear with me if I'm telling you anything wrong there.
You're doing great. Another quick question, I think. Does the paid sick leave apply to illness prior to 4/1?
Oh, I did know the answer to this. No, I cannot remember.
I'll take a note and maybe you'll be able to...
I believe that the answer to that is, I think it's 315.
315?
But don't quote me on that. I'll see if I can look it up while we go on to the next questions.
Okay. A couple people have asked if you can kind of go over the unemployment stuff again. Meaning, how is it calculated again? You had a thing up about how it was calculated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I'll just rewind maybe to that. Can y'all see the slideshow right now?
I see a flower or something.
Oh, a flower or something? That's not what I want you to see. I mean, I do want you to see flower, but not right now. Let's see here. Here we go.
And while you're looking for that, can I give you one other thing that a couple people have asked?
Yes.
And I think you kind of addressed it, I'm not sure, but a lot of people who have already applied, or some people have already applied for unemployment, but it sounds like what you said is if you've already applied, it's still possible to apply for these other things and then afterwards stop your unemployment?
That's correct. Your unemployment, there is no harm in getting unemployment for anybody as long as you are not making this base wage calculation, which you can see, right? Can you see my mouse moving? Can you see my mouse moving, Mom?
Yes.
No. Yeah. So as long as you're, so this is the calculation right here. 1/126 of your highest waged quarter. So if you made $32,000 in a year and it was exactly equal, that would be $8,000. And so 126 of $8,000 is $308. As long as you're making less than $308 a week, you qualify for unemployment in this imaginary scenario.
Okay.
And I hope that helps with the calculation. If not, I would just encourage people to like spend some time staring at the numbers on the slide. I know it's a lot of numbers, but hopefully it'll make sense at that point.
Okay.
You gotta know what your highest waged quarter is, right? That's the key concept here. So if you made really different amounts of money every quarter, you got to kind of do some digging to figure out what that number is. And unemployment people, they know that number because they have your financial history. If you're self-employed, be ready to tell them that history, which is not fun, but that's a consult. That's a much longer conversation.
Gotcha. So for any of these other things.
That being said, the Oregon has not figured out even how to collect that information from self-employed people yet. So hold off on that too.
Gotcha. So because I had multiple versions of this question, if you've already applied for unemployment, that's okay. Once you've applied for these other things, you can stop your unemployment or decline it.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, the exact formula for when is going to be complicated and vary by person, but generally speaking, that's true.
Okay.
Sorry, as long as you meet the criteria of having, if you're having, basically, yes, there's a few exceptions, but that's generally true.
Okay.
95% of the time.
Another, what I think is a quick question, what is the interest for the EIDL?
So if the EIDL is forgiven, so the EIDL, it's important to understand, is a forgivable loan. It is a grant. If you, for some reason, decide to not use that grant to cover things that are allowed in the grant, I don't know why you would do that, but if you did, then it becomes a 4% interest loan. And I cannot remember the terms of it, but and I think actually they're not totally clear. And because usually these are negotiated by banks, not by the SBA. I would say that $10,000 up to $10,000 loan that we talked about over here earlier, to like, that's this one, right? This is a grant, so you're not gonna be paying off this loan. There is no, like, the only reason you have to pay off this loan is if you go use it to like start a new business that does, like, I don't even know what kind of thing, like, yeah, if you use it to pay yourself money, I have trouble even thinking of things that wouldn't qualify under this grant, honestly.
Okay.
So I think it's kind of a moot, it's a non-question. Like,
okay.
That's why I call it option Y, because it's literally why not.
Okay. And so I'm trying to go through all the EIDL questions. On that same vein, I just want to confirm that EIDL can be used mainly for self-pay if needed.
It can be used for anything.
Okay.
Anything related to your business, including paying yourself. So yes.
Okay. Let's see. One question on how do you choose a PPP lender? Do terms vary from the different PPP lenders?
Great question. I don't think anyone knows the answer to that, but I would say go to your bank, and if that doesn't work, go online. And if that doesn't work, go to another bank. There is a list of existing SBA lenders that I'll include in the resource list. You know, this list was from like 6 months ago. So like we're in a whole different world now, but that's the gist.
Okay, another EIDL question here. EID eligibility says, quote, applicant not an agricultural enterprise, for example, farm. Anything on the horizon to address that?
Good question. I believe that is a good question. I believe that is true for the EIDL, but not the PPP. So if I could be wrong, but I do not remember seeing that language anywhere in the PPP things I've read. Apologies in advance if I'm wrong about that. So yeah, that's all I really have to say about that. I would move straight to the PPP, and frankly, like, because your amount you're going to get from the EIDL is going to be deducted from the PPP. You know, basically, if you get the PPP, it merges with the EIDL, right? So unless you're in that's a bummer, but hopefully the PPP works, because that is going to ultimately have the same amount of money, just slightly more restrictive criteria, but yeah.
Okay, I've had a couple people ask about if you can just quickly restate options that apply to rental businesses.
So for a rental business, if you're this is an important thing that I wanna not lead you astray by getting too far into the details on, but it's important to know that there are two types of rental businesses in this world. Those that file Schedule E and those that file Schedule C. And if you don't know what that means, that's a separate workshop. But those that file Schedule E are only going to be eligible for the EIDL and probably, I hope, for unemployment. I have not seen any clarification about that from unemployment at all. If your Airbnb or rental business is filing Schedule C and is a normal business, not a rental business or a rental only operation, then everything in here applies to you. If your business has never, oh, sorry, one more thing. If you've never filed before, then you got a tricky, very tricky choice on your hand, which is much longer than I'm going to cover right now, unfortunately. But regardless, apply for the EIDL. Okay. There's even a place on the EIDL to list how much rental income you've lost. And that being said, it's also possible they'll expand the PPP to include rentals at some point. I don't know if if that's true. And also, there's no harm in trying to get in the door at your bank and talking to them about it. I just, my read of everything I've seen, including unfortunately some very manipulative language on Airbnb's website, is that you have to be operating as a Schedule C business, not as a Schedule E rental operation.
Okay. Another quick question here. If filing for unemployment as a business owner, are the benefits based on salary or salary and owner draws?
Salary plus benefits. Owner draws do not count.
Okay.
So, and that's a whole, well, yeah, that's all I'm gonna say on that.
Okay. Another question here. Can you again compare EIDL to the PPP specifically for a nonprofit with a staff of 8, or is that too specific?
EIDL to PPP.
Mm-hmm.
So the EIDL is a free grant for up to $10,000 that's supposed to arrive any minute now for anybody who applies to it. The PPP, if you filed for the EIDL, merges with the EIDL. The EIDL you get at SBA.gov. The PPP you get at a bank. Okay, but the bank is going to have your records from the EIDL because they're all talking to the Treasury Department about this. So there's no harm. I want to tell people, if you have not gone to COVID-19 relief.sba.gov and applied for this for your organization or yourself, do it tonight. There's literally no reason not to at all. Okay, the PPP is a more complicated thing, right? It's generally speaking going to be a pretty awesome deal for people. It's forgivable if it's used for those purposes. If it's not, it's a very low interest loan, so that's nice too. Okay. The one downside of the PPP, besides the fact that it's a hassle and it's for your bank to figure it out, is that it disqualifies you for option 3, which is the employee retention credit. Okay, which is a more complicated thing, but also less bureaucratic. So it's more complicated math. If you're struggling between the option 1 and option 3, which is basically only if you have a bunch of employees, is that even a consideration? That's a consult with me. It's just too complicated to get into the math by phone.
Okay. Okay. Just a time check. I want to let you know it is 8:01.
Okay. 5 for West Coast. Great.
Pardon?
So we'll do. Is there, how many more questions do you have sent to you?
Actually, just a couple right now.
Cool. Let's do it, and then we'll see where we're at with that after that.
Okay. One is, can you speak to the level of hardship due to the coronavirus for a business or nonprofit having to show, like, in order to qualify for that EIDL or the PPP? I'm not sure myself what level of hardship.
Yeah, good question. I think at this point, if you're in a federally declared disaster area and you can show any change to your programs or income compared to historic time period, that you're going to qualify.
Okay. And then what is the max amount?
And Oregon and Washington are both in that.
Okay, sorry.
The maximum amount for the PPP is 2.5 times your payroll for 1 month. And payroll includes benefits of all sorts, and I think unemployment insurance and workers' comp as well.
Okay. And when you say it's reduced by the EIDL, what amount is reduced?
The total amount of the amount of forgiveness is reduced by the EIDL, because the EIDL, like I said, is up to $10,000 of free money. You don't both get up to $10,000 of free money and get your payroll and rent and stuff for all these things right here. So it's forgivable if used for payroll, rent, utilities, and mortgage interest. You don't both get that forgiveness plus $10,000. You just get a grand total of $10,000, or whatever these numbers are, whichever is bigger.
Okay. One more quick question here. Does a person include payments for workman compensation insurance when they calculate total payroll per employee?
I'm sorry, say it one more time.
when somebody is calculating total payroll per employee, do they include payments they make for worker compensation insurance?
My understanding is yes, but I have only seen that in analysis from law firms and CPA firms. The IRS and the Treasury have not, well, the Treasury would be, Treasury has not issued any sort of clarifying statement on that. They just say benefits. And most people consider workers' comp expenses to be a benefit.
Okay. I have two more questions, and then that's all
I
that
will
I have.
also, sorry, by the way, I'm going to include in the calculator, in the resource I send out, a calculator as well, that for some of these things. Yeah.
Okay, last couple questions. Let me see if I get this one right. I'm not sure I understand the question.
I also I have the answer to the effective date for the paid leave. It is indeed April 1st. So if you got COVID before that, then that's what it is. That being said, if your doctor is recommending you don't leave your house or something like that, or if your kids, obviously, basically the date that it starts for your kids and for you if you're sick or taking care of someone sick is April 1st.
Okay, thank you. A question, what if you just started your business and have not received revenue yet?
So great question. If your business is, so let's see how to best explain this. So, sorry a second, I'm trying to fix that. If your business didn't exist prior to January 31st, none of this stuff applies to you, except for unemployment. If your business has existed for a shorter period of time, actually, I'm sorry, that's not right. I think for the PPP, it might be March 15th. God, I should know the answer. I can't remember. I'm going to make a note to come back to that one, and I'll include it in one of the resources. I know that for the $10,000 loan, that one is January 31st. The date for the PPP is what I'm forgetting. And for unemployment, it could be anytime.
Okay. And one last question here. I hope I'm saying this right. And it's about section 139. Can employers use PPP to pay employees for items the employee may submit a 139 deduction for?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Yeah, can employers use PPP to pay employees for the items that the employee might submit a 139 deduction for?
That's a good question. I would say probably, but I don't know the answer to that, and I kind of doubt that has been clarified.
Okay. Those are all the questions.
That's a really good question, though. I don't know.
If anybody, I think I addressed everybody's question that has sent me in one at this point.
So what we could do if people still have any more, if you see on your little control panel there, there's a place where it says more or comment, and if you, I think the way it works is if you like wave your hand or do something, I'll see it pop up on your screen, and then I could unmute you and you could do a question. If there's anybody who's got other burning ones, I'll see that.
Okay. I'm trying to go back through the questions. I thought I got everybody's, but there were quite a number coming in.
Yeah, right.
So
maybe we're good.
Somebody did say a business must be in operation by February 15th for PPP. That was from SBA.gov.
Okay, cool.
And
that sounds right.
It looks like somebody's messaging me that I missed one, but I'm looking back and I'm not sure I can find it, but you can email that question. And we will, okay, here we are. Last question of the night, okay?
It's possible by the way, I think maybe I see it. I think this person sent it to me instead of you. Is this from Sean maybe?
Yeah.
Let me read it. We are 2 independent contractors who are each self-employed, and we are partnered in an LLC. Can we each apply for an EIDL? No. If you are a legal partnership, then you just have one entity, and that's it. If we do, is our business eligible as well? No. No. One EIDL per business. Yeah, that's it.
Okay. We're good. Great job.
Cool. Thanks, everybody. Don't hesitate to schedule a meeting with me if you are sending an email if you don't know how, and keep in touch about this stuff. And thanks for coming, and thanks for being strong in this scary time. And I really appreciate it. And yeah. Mom, I'll give you a call in a minute to thank you so much.
Oh man, it's been really my pleasure, and good luck to everybody out there. Stay safe.
Thanks, y'all. All right.